Some weird and wonderful things have happened in Formula 1 over the years, and I'm going to talk to you about 10 of them, starting with leading your only Formula 1 Grand Prix. You may not be familiar with F1 driver Marcus Winkelhock, and that may be because he only took part in one single Formula 1 race, but he also had the honour of leading that same race. He replaced Christian Albers for the Spiker team at the Nürburgring in 2007. Mike Gascoigne made a huge strategy call to bring Winkelhock in on the formation lap after it had started to rain, and by lap 2, he was leading. He led for a total of 6 laps and even got to take part in a red flag restart from pole position. Well, it wasn't pole, but you know what I mean. What's even more impressive is that he originally was due to line up last on the grid, so he's the first and only driver to start from last and first in the same race. He then retired from the race on lap 13 though. What a roller coaster of emotions. Finishing 24th. In 2011, there was a record that Narain Karthikeyan would want to forget. 24 drivers finished an F1 race, and he was the last of those drivers. It's a record that has not been beaten, and won't be anytime soon, as we now only have a 20-driver field. The 6-car grid. The United States Grand Prix in 2005 was one of the weirdest F1 races ever, and I remember watching it live. Only 6 cars started the Grand Prix, all Michelin-tired cars. This was back when there were 2 tyre manufacturers in Formula 1. During practice, there was a number of tyre failures, with a major incident for Ralf Schumacher and Ricardo Zonta. Michelin said that without a reduction in speed at turn 13, the tyres would not last more than 10 laps. There were lots of mitigating factors, including no tyre changes. But after Michelin and the FIA were unable to come to an agreement, it was only the Bridgestone runners that started the race. This included the 2 Ferraris of Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello, as well as the Jordans of Narain Karthikeyan and Thiago Monteiro, and finally the Minardi cars of Christian Albers and Patrick Frieshaker. The only reason the Bridgestone runners were believed to have coped with the Indy circuit is because Bridgestone's parent company Firestone provided the tyres to CART, now known as IndyCar, and therefore had experience with ovals, and specifically the newly resurfaced Indy circuit. Unwanted Triple Crown. In a weird turn of events, Hans Heyer became the only Formula 1 driver to not qualify, retire, and be disqualified from the same race. In 1977, he moved from sports cars to single-seaters, but he lacked experience in the latter. He failed to qualify for his home Grand Prix at Hockenheim, but he felt as though he'd come there and he was going to race, so he took the start anyway. Naughty. Remember, this was the late 70s. Much easier to get away with it back then. He had gearbox issues after 9 laps though, so had to retire, but he was also black flagged when the stewards realised he was in the race. Bizarre. Double trouble. Remember double points in Formula 1? We'd be forgiven if you don't, because it only lasted 1 year in 2014. The scheme was introduced at the behest of Bernie Ecclestone in an effort to prolong the championship. Of course it was, because heading into the final weekend, there was only 17 points between Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg in the championship, so either could have won with standard points. But if Hamilton finished 3rd and Rosberg won, he could lose. In the end, Hamilton won and Rosberg dropped out of the points with an ERS failure. Double points were then scrapped, so we literally had it for 1 race. Too close to call. For the next crazy stat, we head back to the 1997 European Grand Prix, where 3 drivers all set the exact same lap time, making it one of the closest qualifying sessions in history. Jaques Villeneuve crossed the line to set a time of 1 minute 21.072 seconds. And then Michael Schumacher crossed the line, setting the exact same time before Heinz-Harald Frentzen joined the party. Incredibly, Damon Hill was only 0.058 seconds down the road, and he was driving for Arrows that year. The 3 drivers having identical times, the pole position went to Villeneuve, who set the time first. Something else happened at the European Grand Prix that year. Wonder what it was. Champions adrift. Speaking of Villeneuve and Schumacher and that 1997 season, one of the most epic battles in Formula 1 was that year, when those 2 brilliant drivers went head-to-head for the World Championship. They shared 12 wins across the season, with 7 to Villeneuve and 5 to Schumacher. They had 13 collective poles, 10 to Villeneuve, and 16 total podiums, 8 each. And yet, they never shared the podium once in the entire season. Not once. Incredible. Double champion. Nigel Mansell is the only driver to hold both the Formula 1 and IndyCar Championship titles at the same time. Others have won both the Formula 1 and IndyCar Championship over the years. Mario Andretti, Emerson Fittipaldi, Jaques Villeneuve. Nigel Mansell, however, is the only driver to hold them at the same time. He left Formula 1 for IndyCar in 1993, and after sewing up the IndyCar title, he actually held both accolades for 3 weeks. It was just a weird set of circumstances with the timing, but still impressive. Banned. Sort of. Jaques Villeneuve had a number of controversies during his Formula 1 career, but back in 1997, he took part in a race after he'd been banned, specifically the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. That year, the FIA were trying to be strict on safety, and during the Saturday practice, Villeneuve passed Jos Verstappen's stranded car, which was being recovered under waved yellow flags. He didn't back off, and neither did a number of other drivers. They received suspended one-race bans, but as Villeneuve had done this on numerous other occasions before, he received an immediate one-race ban. Williams chose to appeal, but because there was no time to hold a hearing, Villeneuve was allowed to race, knowing that he could very well lose any points he gained. So, he was allowed to start on pole position, but he would eventually drop to 5th place. After the weekend, Williams withdrew their appeal, so he lost his points from that weekend. Carnage in Spa. Spa in 1998 was a race I remember very well from watching it on TV as a young boy. It was carnage like I had never seen before. It was a wet race and David Coulthard lost control of his McLaren out of La Source, which caused a chain reaction of events that involved no less than 13 cars. Thankfully, no one was injured, but due to the regulations at the time, any race that was stopped during the first 2 laps would be null and void, meaning that when the race restarted, all drivers were eligible to once again take part from their original starting positions. Back then, there was what was called a T car. Every team had one of these cars, a spare car that either of the drivers could jump into. But some teams had damaged both their cars in the carnage, so hard decisions had to be made. 4 drivers, therefore, did not make the restart. Later on in the race, Michael Schumacher was coming up behind David Coulthard to lap him. He was comfortably in the lead. Coulthard was told to lift off and let him past, but he remained on the racing line, and due to the spray from the wet weather, Schumacher was unsighted and went straight into the back of him, leaving him with only 3 wheels and, well and truly, out of the race. He was not happy. The race would eventually be won by Damon Hill in the Jordan. A very eventful race and one for the history books. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed these quirky Formula 1 stories. If you did, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.